Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. We're here. We're back up. We're recovered from the transfer window. But in true Tottenham fashion, there's more drama just around the corner as Spurs reveal their Champions League squad for the first phase of the 8 games. If it was for the very first time, you can find us. We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. We're on X, we're on Facebook, and we are on Blue Sky too. Like per usual, we're joined by a top-tier panel that are going to break down what we have seen in terms of that announcement of the Champions League reveal and more. Back alongside me, they've all recovered through casting from deadline day. They all had an appearance. We've got them back through makeup alongside us. We've got George Achillia back on the show. George, ready, recovered. Here we go again.
Yeah. That 1 day rest between the deadline day and now is just definitely much needed. Now we're ready to go again. A lot to unpack with, the Champions League team, squads. Everyone seems to be struggling at the moment, but happy to be back on.
Likewise, mate. Lovely to have you here. Also back on the show, needs no introduction. He did a 4-hour stint for us, so he had to have some recovery and come back. But he told us, of course, all different ways you can get around citizenship in the UK. We can't share that on this show, but he did share it live. We've got Ash, of course, from Spurs Kings TV. Ash, how are you, mate? You had us cracking up.
Oh, man, it's all good, man. Listen, when you do 4-hour stints, bro, trust me, you need something to get you through it. And can't believe it, Jeff. But we're here. We're back again. Transfer deadline day is over. I took my tie off. You know the yellow ties that they wear on deadline day? Yeah, man, I left that back in the closet. So, but yeah, man, listen, we move, man. This is Spurs. There's always something to talk about.
Always. Is there not? Always something to talk about. Always something to talk about. Also, make up our panel. You see a lot of them hopefully this season on Last Word on Spurs. Delves into the finances. That's a delve into everything now with Tottenham. There's no getting away from just finances. You have to go anything with this football club. We've got the brilliant Connor over at Levynomics 1882. Con, lovely to have you here. I feel like it's been a busy 3-4 months for you. We've seen you everywhere. So lovely to have you back on, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. My wife did say to me, "You're not podding again tonight, are you?" And I was like, "Well, Ricky's begged me to come back on, so I said, yeah, I've got to do it. But yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Can I just say, all the wives of the cast members of the Men of Last One on Spurs absolutely hate me, and I think also the husbands of the females that appear on the show also absolutely hate me. So sorry to all the partners out there. But the cast need to keep on casting because we've got news that keeps on coming through to us. And obviously the big breaking news we're bringing you in this show is the fact Tottenham have revealed their Champions League squad for the 25-26 campaign, that initial phase of 8 games. And of course, what it does mean for Spurs. Let's bring to you really the big news that they've had out, of course, of that Champions League squad. Before we do, guys, if you can, like the show, of course, subscribe if you can, hit that notification bell so you're aware every time we're going to go live. That'll be greatly appreciated. So the big news you need to know. Summer signings, Randall Colomwani and Xavi Simons have been included in Tottenham Hotspur's squad for the league phase of the Champions League. But Yves Bissouma, and this one's shocking a few people, should I say, Mathys Tel have been omitted. UEFA confirmed the 22-player Spurs A-list on Wednesday, which also included summer arrival João Palhinha and Mohamed Kudus, with other players left out, including the long-term injuries, absentees, that is, of James Maddison, Dejan Kulusevski, Radu Dragusin. Obviously, look, a lot of eyes will point towards Tel being the most notable absentee on that list, yet to start a game under Thomas Frank, and has appeared as a late substitute in the Super Cup against Paris Saint-Germain and in the Premier League matches against Burnley and Bournemouth. Like we mentioned, did not feature in that victory against Man City. He joined Spurs on a permanent basis from Bayern Munich this summer, after she joined the club on a loan deal in the January transfer window. And for those that need to know the details, UEFA rules stipulate that teams can name a squad up to 25 players for their competitions. 8 of those 25 need to be locally trained, and they are split into 2 different categories. You've got the club-trained players, which must have been registered with the club for at least 3 seasons between the ages of 15 and 21, while the association-trained players must have been registered with the club in the same association country for at least 3 seasons between the ages of 15 and 21. Clubs are only allowed a maximum of 4 association-trained players. So, for example, Brandon Austin is a club-trained player because he was developed by Spurs' his academy, whereas Maddison qualifies as an association-trained player because he spent the start of his career with Coventry City. The big issue Spurs have, and it's the big issue they have, is that the third choice goalkeeper, Austin, is the only club trained player in their squad when they are required to name 4. So as a consequence, they must leave 3 places in the squad empty and will only be able to register a reduced roster of 22 players in Europe. It's similar. That happened to Ange Postecoglou in the Europa League, if you do remember, when he had to leave out Jed Spence and Sergio Reguilon out of the squad for the competition's league phase. And Frank Postecoglou's successor has been faced with a similar dilemma. So let's get into your thoughts on this on the boys. I mean, look, some may not be surprised. Some are surprised out there. Let's come to you, G. Your initial reaction to, I suppose, what is the headline news that Mathys Tel out of Tottenham's initial Champions League phase? Let us know your thoughts on that and what you've made of the way Spurs have come to that conclusion on that initial squad list.
Yeah, so when I was looking into it all, I expected it between. I expected it to be between him and Odobert, mainly because, well, to be honest, for a different reason than Spurs have done. I thought we would have wanted to add potentially Dragusin on the list for a bit of defensive reinforcement at centre back, because currently we only have Romero, Van der Ven, and Danzo, because Thomas Frank has said before that he sees Ben Davies primarily as a left back for us, even though obviously he can play centre back. He's primarily a left back under Thomas Frank. So we're kind of left short there, especially if he needs to go for a back 5 against PSG away, for example. There's so many conflicting reports as to when Dragusin is back. Some people are saying it's in 10 days. Some people are saying it's in 2 months. I don't think we really know. I think his omission is quite telling to the fact it's probably quite a while. But at the moment, we're basically not left with many centre-backs in the squad. And so I would have omitted Kinski because of the goalkeeper rule that they've got, where if you lose someone for a long-term injury or a sale, you can bring a goalkeeper in if you're underneath 2 goalkeepers on list A. But Frank doesn't seem to want to take the risk of potentially, let's say Vicario gets red carded and then misses 2 games. We can't bring Kinski in that scenario. It would have to be Austin. So I think Frank just isn't willing to take the risk of not having a much better second goalkeeper available. And Austin has to be there regardless because of the club train rules. So yeah, between Tel and Odobert for me, I think in my eyes, looking at it, I think he's chosen Tel because in my opinion, I think Tel, one, I think he has the better mentality of the two to recover from the situation and knuckle his down, because we saw what he was like at Fulham away. I think he's got a fantastic mentality for someone that's 20 years old. I don't think he'll let him get to him too much, whereas Odobert, to me, sometimes seems quite shy on the pitch, and that could hinder him a lot more. The second reason, and probably the main reason, because of the signing of Colomwani, that basically gives us 3 strikers. And as much as I disagree with Tel being a striker, Ange's used him there, Frank's used him there so far. So he would effectively be a 4th striker in our already small squad of 22, whereas we don't really have that many left-wing players available. So, and that's where obviously where Odobert thrives the most. So I can see why he's left him out. I just feel a little bit disappointed for him.
Okay, we'll come on to maybe what it does mean for Tel and the feeling around that particular decision, because like I say, not everyone's in agreement with it. Some do understand it, some don't understand it. Ash, bringing you in, Bissouma has also been omitted from the squad. This one maybe not as much as a surprise. We'll maybe come on later and show what it means for Bissouma, but just bear in mind, he's not made a competitive appearance for Spurs under Thomas Frank. He's entered that final year of his contract. And when we left you, of course, on deadline day, we were still weighing up where his future was at. But we know Spurs are listening to offers for the Mali midfielder. The window is still open in a number of countries. That includes Turkey, Portugal, Greece, and Saudi Arabia that can still buy players at the moment. Ash, give me your gauge on what you've made of that Champions League squad reveal. Major surprises for you there?
I think with Bissouma, there was a chance for Frank to maybe establish his authority on the actual team, where he has his no dickhead policies, as we discussed before. And him being late is one of the rules where he can't have this type of complacency and afford that to spill on to other players or other team members and have that layout onto the pitch. So I think that's the mantra for someone like Thomas Frank and his coaching staff moving forward. Also, he needs to be an example to the younger players, as we said before. And I just felt like going into the season before last, there was question marks because it was between him and Bentancur because their contracts were up for renewal. So I just felt like the club and maybe Thomas have decided to release Bissouma from his duties. And that's why he's probably not in the Champions League squad. However, I'm not sure how Bissouma's taken to this, and I've already said that he may want to stay a little bit longer, and so does he want to go to Turkey? I'm not sure because he has failed a medical apparently when he was being pushed over for a transfer, so that does worry me quite some bit. However, talking on the actual Champions League players that were admitted out, I just think with Dragusin, I'm not sure if he's match fit yet. Villarreal is not far away. In fact, we're in September already, so I think it's in less than 2 weeks. We go over there, we play them. So are we going to risk having a player that's not quite match fit on the bench, and then something happens, he has to come on? Maybe that's going through their minds. How long will Dragusin take to get up to speed? I do hear with a lot of fans we want to play a back three, but I do know that Thomas Frank played over 50% of games for Brentford last season in a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. So maybe he's just trying to get continuity and some consistency in this back four. And for Kota Takai, the Japanese player, he obviously had the fascia problem with his foot, and therefore they saw him as a risk. And maybe that's the reason why those two centre-backs have been left out, in my opinion. So that's 3 players then I've mentioned. Now, if you come back to the Tel situation, it depends where you profile Tel. Now, some people would have looked at Tel as a Son replacement. And if Tel was the Son replacement, he would therefore play on the left. He played a lot of the games on the left, in my opinion. There were some games when he did start up front. So when he first was signed, he was a striker. So I do agree with Georgia in that sense. But I think he did play quite a few games on the left. And now since Thomas Frank's come in, I think there's not just Tel on the left. I think Odobert can play on the left. I know he's featured on the right before, but he can play on the left. So that's 2 players fighting for the same position, similar age. And then you've also got Brennan Johnson, who's no longer a right winger. He's been deployed to the left-hand side as well. So you've got 3 players. Then you can even throw into the mix someone like Richarlison. That could be a 4th left-sided player. Now, they've brought in Kolo Muani. He's actually played on the left as well, not just for Frankfurt. And I know he's played predominantly on the right wing. If you had to pick out of the 3 positions that he's played, this number 1 position is a striker. So lots of people see Muani as a striker. However, I was talking to 2 of my friends who watch Juventus, the big Juventus fans, and they said last season he did play out on the left. And I'm just thinking, if I'm looking at the profiles, Johnson is a running behind type of forward that operates from the left. So predominantly, he would start on the left, and then he will run in behind, compared to what maybe Odobert does. He wants ball to the feet. He kind of wants to dribble at players. So it's a slightly different style to what a Brennan Johnson is. But then does Odobert run in behind? Then you've got Mathys Tel, who runs in behind, and he's not as technical, I would say, as an Odobert in terms of style. He can dribble, but is he as strong on the ball as an Odobert? That's where you have the question marks. And so maybe they were looking at that when they were making a decision. We're going to bring someone that has a Kolo Muani who's able to do a bit of both, running behind, be on the shoulder, but then it can also beat his man 1v1 and can create havoc being a striker. So maybe they see him as a left forward as opposed to just a centre forward, if that makes sense. So
Absolutely.
you've got that kind of option of him being brought in. The question is the planning. What has been the planning? So I think a lot of people now question the planning in terms of homegrown. Could we have maybe kept some of those players that went out on loan? Maybe they could have been included, and therefore other players wouldn't have to be dropped. Maybe we could include a centre back if we had included some of the not just homegrown but club homegrown trained players. So that's maybe some of the fans thinking, and that might change their view on the actual transfer window, whether it be positive or negative. That's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, Ash, really fair points there. Connor's bring you in. Look, it's worth putting out our squad can also be supplemented by a number of young players born on or after January the 1st, 2004, from List B, which is changeable up until the day of each game. So looking like Mathys Tel could be included from List B as he is 20 years old. Connor, obviously, that's the main notable absence in terms of Tel. There's obviously other ones in there. Like Georgia said, that might be questionable. Obviously, no Dragusin. Again, we're not privy to how far away he is actually from being back in full training and then being back to match fitness. Was you surprised, Con, by any admissions there for you or the overall squad?
Not really. I think the guys have covered it a bit. I think we could have maybe made the choice to go without Kinski, to George's point, because you have the sort of if Vicario was injured for at least 30 days, you could have then brought Kinski back in. But I do think this is just a matter of Frank not necessarily trusting Austin enough just in that event that Vicario is injured for less than 30 days, right? So, and that could be 2 Champions League games that come in that period, I think. So, that could be pretty critical. So I can see why he's done that. For me, I put up this long thread yesterday reflecting on the transfer window. And the one signing that is confusing me is the Tel signing, to be honest, because I think we had enough young wingers forwards that may or may not reach their potential. And particularly after buying Odobert last summer, slightly different profile, but nevertheless a sort of young forward with potential. Seems odd to me to then go and spend 30 million on Tel after obviously paying the loan fee before, which I suspect what it was with Tel was the loan was structured as a loan with an option to buy in January. But I suspect there was always a gentleman's agreement that we were going to trigger that option. Obviously, we renegotiate the fee slightly, but this sort of supports that because obviously Frank is not rating him particularly highly to want to include him in the squad either. So this feels like that classic dreaded club signing back to the Jed Spence and Conte days. But yeah, look, for me, I'm not surprised that Tel's not included. I think the one thing to obviously highlight with the squad is, should we get into Europe next year, this should be a lot easier from next year because Bergvall and Gray can both go onto the B list from next year because they will be under the age of 21 and will have done at least 2 years at Tottenham. So that makes things a lot easier. And then after that, once they get above the age of 21, they'll be on the club trained list. So things will ease a lot once that happens. But yeah, I mean, the other thing I would say about the squad, look, I think our issue seems particularly bad, and there was a lot of meltdowns, I think, over the summer around, should we go in for like a Carl Walker-Peters or a Dennis Sirkin because we're worried that we're only going to have a squad of 22. I think that's exacerbated for us by the fact that our List B academy players are not great, and the ones that would be good we've loaned out, the likes of Mikey Moore and Donnelly, and obviously they're not ready for Champions League anyway, but they would have been decent squad fillers to have. We probably only got the likes of Dane Scarlett now, and then you're looking at who didn't even go on the Korean tour, by the way.
No.
The likes of Byfield, Tynan Thompson, people that some of the fans in the chat probably have never heard of, right?
Yep.
But I think what I would say, I mean, I've looked through the rest of the Champions League squads for the other English teams, and not one of them has 25 players on their A list, right?
Right.
So,
okay.
Arsenal have got 23, and then they've got Nwaneri and ML and Lewis Skelly on their B list, so that helps supplement it. Newcastle don't have a single club trained player, so they've got 21. They get to include Lewis Hall and Miley on their B list. Chelsea's 23, Liverpool's 22, Man City's 23. So I think these meltdown. Obviously, we're so consumed by Tottenham, we only focus on Tottenham. But when
that's all we think about. Yeah,
exactly. And do you know what? I was reflecting on this, and sorry to bring it back to finance, but I do think
that's fine. You go for it.
I will. I think the financial regulations are creating this issue because you've got 2 sets of rules that are slightly at odds, right? So these rules for UEFA in terms of squad registration are obviously trying to incentivize teams to have academy products and keep their academy products and have club trained players. And then on the other hand, you've got clubs being able to take the full profit for PSR purposes and for the UEFA financial regulations when they sell their academy products, right? So these 2 things are slightly at odds. And this is why I think you're seeing a shortage of club-trained players over the age of 21, i.e. those not on the B list anyway, at these English clubs. Because, you know, you take a Newcastle, for example, they would have had Anderson before. Elliot Anderson, he would have been club-trained, but obviously they sold him because they had to comply with PSR. So, yeah, it is interesting how that's slightly at odds, but I would say, you know, to the fan base, I think having 22 players is touch wood this season. If we're okay with injuries, should be absolutely fine.
Yeah. Before I talk about Radu, George, and discuss a bit more detail about the Tel, obviously just to take him out of the squad, just for everybody's awareness of this, for listeners on audio, I'm going to read you out what that squad is in terms of what Spurs have gone with. So in terms of their goalkeepers, we've got Vicario, Anton Kinski, Brandon Austin. Defender-wise, Spurs, Pedro Porro, Jed Spence, Christian Romero, Mickey van der Ven, Kevin Danso, Ben Davis, Destiny Udogi. Midfielder, Rodrigo Benson-Core, João Palhinha, Archie Gray, Lucas Bergvall, Pat Matassar, Xavi Simons, Mohamed Kudus, Brennan Johnson, Wilson Odobert. And then Spurs, in terms of the forwards they've selected, Dominic Solanke, Richarlison, Randall, Kolo Muani. For those that are interested, you know, the European non-locally trained players, 21 currently, maximum 17. Those are, just so everybody is aware, Vicario, Kinski, Porro, Danso, Dragusin, Udogi, Romero, Van der Ven, Bentancur, Yves Bissouma, João Palhinha, Odobert, Kulusevski, Richarlison, Sarr, Bergvall, Tel, Takai, Kudus, Siemens, Muani. Then the association trained players, 6 currently, 4 can be used in exclusive slots. Solanke, Davis, Maddison, Johnson, Spence, Archie Gray. And then the club trained players, 1 currently, 4 required. We've got Brandon Austin in there. I know, George, the feeling from what I can see from some of the fan base is that, and then Connor alluded to it in his previous monologue there, was that the situation around Tel, it raises questions as to whether this is a player that really Thomas Frank personally wanted, or whether this was, again, a deal the club looked at and thought this is worth triggering. And the reason why I say that is there was such a short window in between Spurs making it permanent to when Frank came in. I said this to Jason the other day. I failed to believe how Thomas Frank really had enough time to be able to see Tel detailed enough in training to think, yeah, I want 40 million of my transfer budget to go on Mathys Tel. Is that fair for some fans to be thinking, was this really a Frank-approved signing when, let's be honest about it, 2 to 3 weeks of the window we just shut, a lot of that was chasing, as we know, Fabinho of Man City. So you're gauging that, George, as to whether you look back now and think, was Tel a panic buy from the previous window? Because, again, he was a deadline day signing, if everyone does remember.
My feeling around it is that it's categorically a club signing for 2 reasons. The first is, if you remember back when we signed him initially, Postecoglou gave his press conference afterwards, and he was alluding very, very strongly that he was going to be a Spurs player beyond the summer. So that, to me, is exactly what I think Connor was saying earlier. They already knew that this was going to happen no matter what. And obviously Levy's just negotiated a lower fee because that 6 months didn't go necessarily as well as we hoped. But to me as well, I was always expecting Tel to become a permanent player no matter what had happened, based off of what Ange Postecoglou said all the way back in January. The second thing is, when we got Frank in, I'm pretty sure there was an interview with Tel when he first signed, and he admitted that he hadn't even had a conversation with Thomas Frank. So that already says to me that Thomas Frank was never privy to the choice of whether to have him or not. It was, no, we're bringing in Tel. This was already agreed months ago. And I imagine it's a lot to do with Bayern wanting to sell him to us because of the payments that they still owe us for Harry Kane. And it's a shame because, to be honest with you, in my personal opinion, like when he was first, when there was first links towards him, I was doing a lot of research into him, and I was really excited about what I saw from his sub appearances and his games at Bayern Munich. To me, he looked a really exciting player. I thought he had a really good under 21 Euros in the summer, but for one reason or other, he just didn't really hit the ground running in those 6 months. And in fact, I think his best game was that Frankfurt away game for me. I thought him and Udogi on that left side worked really, really well. but it's completely fair to say that his 6 months in total were not great at all. So it's not a surprise he's been left out. But yeah, it just feels like to me that this is not someone that Thomas Frank probably would have wanted in the first place and was not really given much choice.
It's interesting because obviously Frank at the time, just for fair balance of the show, come around to you, Ash. Frank commented at the time about him signing and said he's very, very excited about Tel joining the club on a permanent deal and believes that he can develop the player further. He said, I'm very excited about Mathys signing with us permanently. I think he's a talented player who can play across the front 4 positions. He's a goal scorer that we can develop even further and be even more consistent in his all-round game and more consistent to the land in the right positions in the box. I'm looking forward to it. And that's referring to working with him. Obviously, I know, again, feeling again, like George has said there in the comments around his arrival to Tottenham permanently does leave one maybe wanting and maybe asking the questions, was he really a club signing? Was he a Thomas Frank approved signing? But what's quite telling is, I think, as we mentioned, that, in the game so far, he's only come off the bench. He hasn't featured from the start for Thomas Frank. And Again, it raises questions in that himself and the fact that we chased 2.5 weeks to the window for Savinho. I mean, you said it in your earlier part, Ash. Do you think now the player's going to need some real genuine support to have to get through this? I mean, we're assuming the player would be disappointed. I imagine he would be, because every player wants to play in the Champions League. And quite interestingly, I thought, when Spurs bought him, there was a reference made about the fact he's Champions League experience, but we've not included him in the first 8 games. I mean, what do you take away from that, Ash, for you?
Can you imagine, like, in Bayern Munich, you were like 3rd or 2nd choice.
Yeah.
And you've gone to our new club to get minutes.
Yeah.
And you end up like 4th in the pecking order. Because the way they're vying for Savinho, we're definitely coming back from in January. To me, that says it all. Do you know what I mean? And Frank's a nice guy. Do you know what I'm saying? He's going to say all the right things.
Yeah.
He's going to say all the things that, either the fans want to hear, the club want to hear. And he might genuinely believe he can develop a player like Mathys Tel, because he didn't play for the France under-21s squad for no reason. He did play and feature there and get a couple goals in that particular tournament. So there might be some truth behind it. But the fact that we missed out on Savinho and we've gone for a player called Kolo Muani, who was the original player we went for before
and rejected us on the last
and
January
rejected us.
though.
So people saying, we don't want to say he rejected us. Guess what? Kolo Muani rejected us too. Yeah, how about that? Huh? Yeah, narratives. I love him. So it's like Muani's like the actual finished product, whereas Tel's the guy like trying to get to that level. You got obviously Muani.
Is that your feeling, guys? Is that your vibe? That's what your vibe is on that?
Well, I think so, because Muani's the one we went for first. It's like you went for this baddie, you went for this particular girl, and this girl turned you down. So then you had to go for, like, what I'm saying, the year below, innit? I don't know. That's what it's given.
People had a lot of nightclub managers in this last week on this bloody show.
I'm just saying. Look. But I'm not here to, like, say like Mathys Tel compared to Muani. Muani's just got that much more experience in terms of, like, he's played for
5 different clubs, 5 European clubs.
Yeah, 5 European clubs, and he's played in Champions League as well, and he's played against us as well.
You look at his goal ratio as well, goals to game ratio. It's very, very good. I mean, even last season,
it's going to be night and day. And I think with Frank, he's going to come into this particular club. He knows the ambition of the fans. They came out and said they want to compete on all 4 fronts. He doesn't have any room for margin of error. So yes, we can be nice. It could be a fairy tale, because that's what Spurs are all about. We want to see guys like, remember what happened to Jed Spence? Like, he was shunned out. Do you understand? He was not fancied at all. And look at what he's done. He's in the England squad now. So we would love it that Tel doesn't make it into the squad, but then he fights his way through the Premier League. He becomes a hero. And guess what? In January, he might be included. He's still young. He's got many seasons ahead of him, many years ahead of him. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's got a good mentality. And as you said before, out of the 2, he would probably be the one that could handle this. So I think that's what it is. I think any other way, like, look, I saw Bergvall threw his bib on the floor. Yeah, I'm saying before the game. Before you know it, Bergwell's playing. Do you understand? I see Kingski saying, I want a loan. I want to move out. Do you understand? Before you know it, Kingski is included in the Champions League squad. Why? Because they're probably going to promise him, you'll get minutes in Champions League. You'll get minutes in the Cups. That's what's going on. So if you kick up a fuss, you've seen it with players like Isaac.
We've seen it this week.
You've seen it with other players. When you kick up a fuss, then they're like, all right, cool. Who would be less disappointed? They would have sat down like us, like how we are in a room. Yeah, would have sat down and said, look, here are the players. What do you think? You know, like X Factor, and they've got all the cards. And
who's going to judges' houses?
This is it, bro. So it ain't no different. So I reckon that's what it is, bro. But I like to Connor's part. I think he's right. Like Liverpool had to hold back their young kid, Rio. Do you understand? Rio came on and he banged a goal. Debut. Do you know what I'm saying? And he's not making it to Champions League. Chiesa, who they bought last season, he's not making it to Champions League. Do you know what I mean? There's a player for Nottingham Forest, Hutchison, Amari Hutchison. He's not making it in for Nottingham Forest in Europa. So there are other players in other squads that aren't going to make this particular round. So we're not the only club. Like it's not. We don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in a bubble, even though it feels like it.
Feels like we live in a Spurs bubble, doesn't it? It feels like we're just stuck in this Spurs bubble. We can't get out of the bubble. It's quite funny, Con. I mean, people actually watching the show live reminded me. Tel rejected us too at the start when we went in for him. And I actually got on the phone to convince him to come to the club. That feels like a long time ago now. Feels like a long time ago. I suppose, Con, the key thing I ask is how you feel Tel will deal with this setback. Because again, he strikes me really as what I've seen so far, again, a massive confidence player. And I think we've seen that even in the games that he's come on. He had a really good shot actually in the second half against Bournemouth, where if that goes in, I mean, it's a welding. Maybe that completely changes the whole perspective for him in this early part of the season. But do you back him to come through this? What would be decided? I'd imagine the same as Ash. I think he would think to him, it's a bit of a setback. Would you agree, Con, for the player? I mean, you might weigh up who would take it better, Odobert or him. But Odobert's still very, very young. I mean, let's be honest about it. Odobert is a raw talent. You know, Tel has played for Bayern Munich. And like Ash said, he's come from Bayern Munich to Tottenham, and he still can't get in Tottenham's Champions League squad. That's got to be difficult for the player, right, Con?
Yeah, it definitely will be. I think Ash touched on it, though. I think, to be honest, there's not a huge amount to choose between Odobert and Tel. They're both raw. They're both, got a lot of potential, but nowhere near ready at the moment. But I think Odobert offers a bit more of a different profile, right? And Ash touched on it. The Tel almost that Kolo Muani signing has killed Tel in terms of his position in the squad, in my opinion, of that sort of person that can play out wide or up top. And I mean, Odobert is your more sort of traditional, quite technical, out and out winger, so he offers something a little bit different, probably. It doesn't surprise me, I have to say. I think the one positive of Tel, I think, since he's been here, as the guys touched on, has been his mentality. So you'd hope he'd be able to bounce back from this. I mean, look, I think it'll be interesting to see what he does against Doncaster, which is in a couple of weeks in the Carabao Cup. For me, Tel has to start that game. I think Frank should absolutely start him in that game. I know that's not going to be the glitzy lights of Champions League nights against Villarreal, obviously, but I think I think it's up to him. And the guys picked it up. Spence is a great example of someone who's taken this type of situation, turn it around, and see where you go. But unfortunately, this is the reality of life, isn't it? And there's with the limited squad spaces that we've got, for me, it was the person that had to miss out, and it's a tough message, but we move on.
I think these are the moments that are sort of going to define a player's career a little bit, in the sense of how they kick on from this moment. Spencer's a great example. I think another one was Sonny. Sonny joined when he was 21 years old. He wanted to give up and leave after the first year.
Agreed.
Until Pochettino told him to convinced him to stay. And look, he's ended up being one of the biggest legends of our club. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily where Tel's going to go, but come on, the guy's 20 years old. There are ample number of world-class players that were nowhere near the level of anywhere at 20 years old. Kevin De Bruyne, Mo Salah. Like, there are so many that were never the heights where they were. It's just where they kick on from moments like this. And I think Spence is a perfect example where that's happened. Son's another one as well. So we just got to hope that he can kind of ride through this and take his opportunities, like Conor was just saying there, in the League Cup, in the FA Cup, where you'd like to think, going to get his chances. Because that Doncaster game, you got Doncaster on the Wednesday, then Wolves on Saturday evening, and then it's Villarreal on the Tuesday night. Bodo Glimt on the Tuesday night. Sorry, so
there's gonna be a lot of minutes there, isn't it?
He's going to play in those games, and he's got to prove himself in those games.
I just wonder, boys, just a quick yes or no on this before we do go for the first break. I'll just go around the table very quickly on this. I'll start with you, George. Who is, in your opinion, more developed and you can see more of a future at this moment in time? Would you say it's Tel or Odobert? Which one?
I'd say Odobert, again, mainly to do with the profile, though, I think, because like the guys were saying there, I think the maturity-wise, I think Tel is absolutely leagues ahead of Odobert. I think Odobert, like I said before, is a bit too shy on the ball sometimes. He is looking a little bit better in his appearances. So I think mentality-wise, I think Tel's clear of Odobert. Right. But I think we've got, like the guys were saying there, we've got Colomwani, we've got Richie, who could do the striker left side. We've got Dom Solanke as a striker as well. Whereas I don't think Tel is just an out-and-out number 9. So I think there's a lot more of a pecking order for him to be able to develop in that role. Whereas Odobert really, for that left side in particular, is the only player that we have that is a proper, dribbly winger that takes him on, like similar to Kudus, but obviously just not as strong. So I think Tel is more developed in that sense. In football sense.
It's funny when you think about it now. If you did sign Lookman, could you imagine the complications that would have caused on deadline day if you did bring in like a 7th winger?
It probably would have been Odobert out. It probably would have been Odobert and Tel both out in that case.
And you had 2 places to deal with. All right, boys. Yes or no? Just very quickly. Ash, who do you feel is the more developed and you can see having more of a career at Spurs at the moment? Tel or Odobert? Which one for you at the moment?
Yeah, I have to agree with George. I think Odobert, just this profile in terms of touchline, 1v1 dribbling, close control, physical, low back lift in terms of shooting, either foot, weak foot finishes as well. In pre-season, I thought he was the better of the two when it was Odobert and Kudus on either wing. I thought we looked a lot more proficient, a lot more safe in possession. And I would look forward to seeing Odobert combined with some of the new signings, or at least coming on and creating some type of havoc with some of his direct runs and his on the ball. Like, I think he's a lot more confident and more assured running at players, in my opinion. And I even saw him in that kind of when he played off the right, he almost kind of drifted into the middle of the pitch, and that kind of excited me as well. So I could almost see him. I remember at Burnley, he played in the 10 and he scored a wonder goal, top corner. And I was like, if Frank can do something with that and maybe position him either left or right, then I'll be very excited alongside someone like a Xavi Simons as well. Both short, both quick on the ball, both brave, So, for me, it's Odobert.
I appreciate, Con, what's being referred to is that I know they're 2 different kind of players, different kind of profiles, but obviously this is the decision that Frank has had to make over one of them, right? Because this was the debate everyone was having on the pubs or on social media about which ones are you going to leave out. He's decided to leave out Odobert, which then kind of probes that question in, I suppose, in Frank's mind, who he does feel would have been the more viable option that he's made that decision on. What do you think, Con? Can you see the same thing as the boys when they're saying they can understand why it was Odobert ahead of Tel, and that's where Frank's mind would be at the moment on both players?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's done a bit more. I don't think either have done loads, right? Because at the moment we're pigeonholing Johnson out on the left ahead of them, and we all know that Johnson has issues when it comes to his contributions in games if he isn't scoring, right? So, and certainly that's even worse when he's playing on the left. So, look, I don't think either of them have set the world alight yet, but they're both super young, as the guy said, and I think the problem for these young guys, to be honest, is we are judging, and Archie Gray gets this a lot, particularly on other shows, right? I think we're judging them very harshly because of the fact that we've underinvested in ready-made players before this window, right? So, the likes of Odobert, Tel, Gray, big money signings, expected to deliver right now. If we hadn't signed Tel, just for example, and you'd spent the Tel money on a Lookman, right, and Odobert was your second choice in that situation, I think
Yeah.
everyone's feeling a lot happier about the left wing. There's a very different outlook. You know, Odobert can get his minutes, come on, make impacts in games, come on in the League Cup. And everyone's probably feeling a lot different about some of these youngsters, and you know that's not their fault, right? It's not Archie Gray's fault that the club
No.
decided to spend
No.
40 million on him and
No.
didn't buy a number 6 last season when we needed one, right?
Yep.
And you know, I think one of the guys touched on it. Like, there's plenty of players at 18, 19, you know, have gone on to be real top players that you didn't even know of at 18, 19. I bet if you looked up Semenyo's stats when he was 19, 20, he wasn't even playing at the top in the top division, right? So we do need to calm down a little bit.
I'm pretty sure
youngsters.
Mbeumo was in the second division of the French league.
There you go, right?
And, like
and there'll be hundreds of examples of this,
So
right?
many.
So
Yeah.
And that's the shame of it for these guys. But yeah, look, I think for us, it's just because we know we need to be doing more in terms of that established signing. We started to do that this window. I know we're going to touch on that later. So
Yes.
yeah, I think Odobert is the right decision to leave Tel out. Neither of them are ready just yet, but let's see how they develop. And Frank is the right man, I think, to develop them because he is an absolute coach.
Okay, guys, before we just go there to a quick break, just a yes or a no. We know Yves Bissouma left out of the squad, as we've mentioned, and at the moment we do know, as we've said to you, that you've got the Turkish window still open, you've got the Saudi window still open, you've got the Portuguese window still open. One thing to bear in mind with Bissouma is Ben Jacobs said on this show a week or so ago, or it might have been Paul O'Keefe, forgive me, I think Paul actually told us that he obviously is only a year away from UK citizenship. I know Ash was telling us on deadline day there are certain ways you can maybe skirt around this, depending on who you know, how you know, what you do. I'm not going to say anything more on that. We don't want to get banned on here. George Bissouma, what's his future look like? What do you think these next week or so looks like for Bissouma? Would he stay at the club and just accept a bit part role where he would feature predominantly, you'd imagine, in day Premier League games off the bench? But he's obviously now in a place where, because of his timekeeping, is he even further down the pecking order when you think, well, you got maybe Polina first, then it's great, then it's Bissouma. I mean, I don't know. It feels like the club wanted to obviously actively try and get rid of him, and they haven't been able to do so far, George. What does Bissouma's future hold?
Yeah, I personally don't see a future for him at Spurs now. I think Frank's taken that moment in pre-season or beginning of the season, whenever it was, to just effectively nail down the fact that he's not in the plans, right? And I think when you look at those midfield options, we're going to be playing a double pivot for most games in most season. There's going to be two of Palhinha, Bentancur, Sarr, Bergvall, Gray. That's like 5 players there. And I think in this current situation that we're in, Bissouma will be 6th choice in midfield. And you'd imagine that Xavi Simons is going to start in the 10 most matches that we can get him to play. So now, in my opinion, I think he's done. I think we'll try and look to get him a move whilst the other window is still open. I think, correct me wrong, I think the club tell the players to look for moves more than anything than the club actively looking to sell. So it'll be interesting to see if Bissouma himself is looking to go away. I just don't see any player, no matter what nationality status or citizenship they're trying to get, is going to want to sit and be not even on the bench. He won't make the bench for at least 6 months. No, I think we've got too many players ahead of him in the pecking order, whether that be forwards, midfielders. Yeah, I just don't see it in my eyes.
Okay, Ash, do you agree with George there? Do you think Bissouma in this next week or so will see some movement? What do you reckon?
You know what? If he hadn't failed that first medical, I would say yeah, but I don't know if his head's there. I don't know if he's got too much gas. You know what I'm saying? Too much helium.
Helium or
yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, it just kind of frustrates me. I think he does want to stay in the country a little bit longer. If it had been a Prem move, obviously I was a bit more confident, but Turkey, I don't know if he wants to go over there because that's the market is still open. Unless Saudi come along and he changes his mind and he wants to get a couple rollies, wants a few, Air Maxes, couple Jordans. I don't know, innit? Money talks. Come on, So, but yeah, I agree with George again because look, Bissouma, if he's not getting on a half turn, I don't see the point of him. I'll be real, because that was the whole difference. He was meant to be the press resistant 6 that kind of helps to bring the ball forward through the defensive thirds into the middle thirds and then get to the man that can, run down the wings, whatnot. So Yeah, he's a player that's let down a lot of fans, in my opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of fans had a lot of hope for him, and he's just continuously let himself down, let the fans down, and more importantly, his country. That's all I got to say.
Tom, Bissouma, I feel like that was a really big statement there from Ash, the way you ended it on that kind of mic drop moment now. But it's a shame because I remember when we were looking at this guy, you know, he always looked great against the top six. I remember watching Bissouma against the top six when we didn't have him, thinking this guy looks so good, and he's come to us. And to be honest with you, I mean, if anything, he hasn't looked that great against any of the top six, the top 10. He had a great final against, obviously, United in Bilbao. That was brilliant in the final. He had that great start with Ange. The 10 games. I don't know what happened at Luton game. I don't know if we'll ever know what happened at Luton game when he got sent off and never really ever recovered from there. But what do you think, Con, the next week holds for Bissouma? Do you think he'll get a move, or do you think he will be part of the squad? And I mean, by George's account there, George doesn't think he'll even make the bench. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was buzzing when Tottenham signed him because it came out of the blue as well. If people remember, it was like it was Gary Jacob in the Times reported it, and then it was done. Right, there was none of this, you know, like we get now where we hear about players forever. And 25 million felt like a great price. You know, I think as you say, we watched snippets of him for Brighton when he played against the Big Six or whatever, and he always looked a top player. I remember him running a game against Tottenham once at the Tottenham Stadium when I was there. You know,
you know that, Con. They all run a game. They all run the game against us.
True. I would have probably run the game against Tottenham, to be fair. But yeah, look, I think, I mean, he's an absolute clown. He's a joke. For me, I'd rip up his contract. I'd go as far as to do that if you can't sell him. If he gets to the end of the window and we still haven't sold him, I'll rip up his contract.
Was it 12? He's inside the last year, isn't he? I don't know if they would.
He's got part of a year left. You just don't need those sort of bad apples around the club who, you know, who just set the tone so badly. You know, awful attitude. Ash was right. He's let himself down. Let his teammates down, turning up late. You know, there was some outrageous revisionism on X and things after he wasn't picked in the Super Cup squad of, you know, or maybe if he was actually in the squad and Frank didn't not pick him, you know, he might have done a better job than Archie Gray. And did Frank act too swiftly doing that? And it's like, look, as soon as someone shows that lack of professionalism, you've got to come down on it with like a.
He's done it more than once, Con. He's done it under Conte. He's done it under Ange.
He's not young either. He's supposed to be one of the leaders.
He's not young.
Yeah. But when you've done it 2 or 3 times, how do you condone it? Like you say,
you have to give him alarm clock. That's what it is.
But yeah, look, he's an absolute clown. So yeah, I hope we sell him. And if we don't sell him, as I say, I would just terminate his contract because you're going to pay the wage anyway. You might as well just pay it off in one go and get that bad apple out.
It's a shame because it's a player that we had such high confidence to think he was going to come in and be that player that we all hoped he would be. I mean, the amount of people that would watch him and think this guy will be amazing in a Spurs shirt. It's like we've all said, it's a real letdown, isn't it? Real
first
letdown.
10 games under Ange.
Yeah.
He was
brilliant. He was
I was having Biss over Rice in those debates. And I was like, this guy's one pass.
Yeah.
And it's just how swiftly that fell after Luton was immense.
George, I still get reminded of that, by the way. I get my Arsenal fan mates picking out comments when I was like raving about Bissouma. They're probably recording me just doing that, calling him a clown, and they'll send it in response. But anyway.
I think what you said about him 12, 18 months ago. Look, we're going to squeeze in our first break of the show for our listeners and audio. We've got 7,500 of you that are watching us live. Guys, thanks ever so much as always for your incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. Look, I think it's one of those, isn't it, now, where you look at now the fact that the window is closed, you start to analyse what we have done, what we haven't done, have we done enough? And we're joined by the brilliant George Achillia. You can catch George on all the socials, George Achillia. We've got Ash from Spurs Kings TV, who's got a show directly after this. We're going to redirect you over there once I get the link, but I will get the link and I'll find the link for you. That's going to come over. And I've got Connor from @Levynomics1882. Please make sure you give him a follow on there. Guys, keep liking, keep subscribing to Last Word on Spurs. The window is over. So, I mean, it's that big question that we always ask when we come to the end of it. Have we done enough? Have we done enough? We left you on deadline day. I know people are laughing about this because we left you on deadline day without knowing where Brian Hill was going. Brian Hill did end up at Girona. And even though Manuel Solomon was offered a plane, he was offered a flight to Lisbon, Manuel Solomon ended up at Villarreal. So Spurs doing their best to ensure Thomas Frank's got the players he wants to work with. How do we all feel now, guys? I mean, what, 48 hours on from the window closing? Let's come over to you, Ash. How do you feel now the window's closed? Do you feel that we are much stronger? Because Johan Langer's done an interesting interview where he seems to think we are much stronger.
Yeah, no, we are stronger. Let's have it right, man. Let's be honest with ourselves. Because if anyone told me I was getting kudos, are you mad? Kudos from West Ham that don't deal with us, they haven't sold to us in like 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
I'm like, I would have said, nah, man, you're chatting breeze, man. So yeah, kudos alone for me was like a big thing. And then we knew we needed a 6. So the right wings, because Johnson plays there, and everyone's like, we need a right winger and we need a 6. And we got Paulinho, someone that a lot of fans respected, one of the best defensive midfielders in the league at the time before he left to go Bayern Munich. And everyone was like, oh, it just makes sense. You know, if we got Paulinho, that would just sort out the situation. And we managed to grab him on loan. So those first 2 signings were just like, yeah. Obviously, the Japanese signing of Kota Takai, he was, I don't know. He's a young player as a prospect, come at a certain price. So I don't think too many people were bothered about him. But those first 2 other senior players that were coming from the Premier League, that have the Premier League experience, I thought that was massively different from seasons gone by when we've done players that are either potentials or they don't have the Premier League experience, or you've got some of the fan base that are unsure on players. Like, we're kind of split in the middle. Richarlison being one of them. You know, some people loved Richarlison, some people weren't sure about him. So it was like a 50-50 in terms of that. But I think with Kudos, it was like, wow, everyone was pretty much on board. I'd say a good 95%. With Paulinho, again, there was a good percentage of fans that were really happy about that signing. And it was 2 positions I felt that needed to be filled. Obviously, in between that timeline, a few things happened, which kind of like messed with the mood.
Being polite there, you Ash. Mess with the mood.
Kind of like spoilt the party. Do you know what I mean? So, like, look, it's the first time something like this has happened, and it had to be like a Spurs. It had to be us, innit? It had to be us. Like, we just break the records for certain situations, and that really did spoil the mood. And then obviously we followed that one up with another one. So it was like double jeopardy, but it was even worse because it was amount of time between 2 of them. I think that's what made people crash out a lot. And then I think Connor mentioned it, you know, we've had so much rumors about this one and about that one. And obviously that's not the club's fault, but there's so many people that are in the known, and, you know, allegedly journalists coming out, people punching up journalists like, oh, you're a fraud, Romano. How can we ever trust you? So there was a lot of that going on, which was draining, not for all fans, because not everyone's on X, not everyone's in the WhatsApp groups where they receive those messages. They're smart people, do you know what I mean? But for everyone else that got drawn into it, it kind of messed with the energy and the mood. And then obviously after that, we got some players, and we got our Xavi Simons. And the reason why that was surprising, because he actually said he wanted Chelsea. He was like, I want Chelsea. And the fact that we hijacked Chelsea, if you want to put it like that, it made a lot of fans feel a lot better, because they were like, yeah, this is the player we wanted in the first place. This is the player that was even better than the ones that we had around us. So again, regardless of who we wanted, this is a quality player. So in seasons gone by, we wouldn't have necessarily offered that type of money or those type of wages for this particular player with so much room to grow and become a world star. He's a world star already. So a marquee signing we needed after Son went. You know, he was the figurehead, as you know, we would say. Obviously, they play in different positions, but Simons has played out on the left wing before. So again, a number 10 after Maddison went down. This is the type of guy we wanted to come in and kind of push us up another level. So I'm saying we got a 10, we got a 6, we got a right winger. And then on the deadline day, we managed to bring in a player that covers not just the centre forward position, but he covers the left wing as well. So all in all, people were generally happy. I just think when it comes to the left wing that we actually wanted in terms of Savinho, and then the left back / centre back situation, people felt like, yeah, it was great, but it was just that little piece left. And Spurs always leave you wanting more, in my opinion. So that was the window for me in a nutshell, without me going any further or too much in detail. I think those were the windows in a shortfall.
Let's come around to you. It's shut. It's over. We haven't got to think about it now for at least another 3 months. How would you gauge it? We saw a massive, actually, for those that haven't seen it, I'd recommend you go look at Con's post on X under @Leavingnomics882, a really good breakdown as to what Spurs did do in terms of from a financial perspective. For those that maybe haven't got X, Con, maybe you want to explain on here, what do you make of that window in general, what they've done?
Yeah, I think, look, Ash touched on some of it there. I think there is, what I'll give credit for. I think there's a clear uptick in the type of quality we've signed this window for sure. I think Kudus, Palhinha, Simmons, Muani. I know two of those are loans, but nevertheless, it's 4 significant improvements to the starting 11, which for me I weight pretty significantly when I think of my sort of rating of the window, because I weight that more significantly, for example, than signing a left centre back depth, because these are needle mover type guys, and they are real quality for sure. And so I think I gave the window a 7.5 out of 10, with those 4 guys doing a lot of heavy lifting. But Ash touched on it at the end of that. What I think is a bit of a shame is there was a real opportunity, I think, in this window, particularly given that they did those 2 shrewd loan deals which saved budget, to really go above and beyond what we normally expect as Tottenham fans and deliver a 9 or a 10 out of 10 window. And I think if we'd seen that left winger come in, if we'd seen that centre back, full back hybrid depth, I think happy type, God forbid I should mention his name after where he's gone, but if that had happened, I think people would be rating it 9 or 10 out of 10. So for me, the left winger was non-negotiable as well, with Son going. I think we would have known for some time Son was going. You've had all summer to get your target. Not to mention they could have probably succession planned better for him going anyway, because he was starting to be on the decline. And we haven't got that one over the line. And I don't think we're quite yet in that sort of situation that Liverpool's in, where they can make those decisions, where they go, do you know what, in this window, we'll wait. Because I just think it's such a glaring hole in that starting 11. And the opportunity cost potentially of not doing that for us could be massive in terms of, potentially making top 5 or whatever. I think we've closed the gap massively on Newcastle and Villa. Villa obviously had a bit of a shocker of a window given the financial restrictions they have on themselves. Newcastle's was mixed. Obviously, they've lost Isak, but made some other decent signings. The top 4's run away a little bit, I think, and it's going to take a few years to close that gap. But I do think we've made a good start. I think financially, we're 4th in the Premier League in terms of net spend, 7th in terms of gross spend. Which no doubt when Mr. Levy talks about his window, he will remind us all how we were 4th on net spend, because he does like to remind the fans about what we're spending. However, I think when you look at what are actual squad improvements this year, so you exclude the likes of Danso and Tel, who were here last year, so financially you absolutely have to include them. But I'm just saying, in terms of what does our squad look like versus what it looked like last year, you take those out, you take Vuskovic out, which was a signing this year, suddenly our adjusted net spend comes down quite significantly, and we sit 10th in the Premier League for that when you do that for all of the other clubs as well, in terms of actual squad improvements on the previous years. So this is where, my point around, did we go that extra mile that we could have? I think we created that opportunity to do that, and unfortunately didn't take it, which is a bit of a shame. But as I say, overall, definitely a step in the right direction.
Yep.
And really excited to see what Frank can do. I think Frank is a fantastic appointment, and hopefully he can work with his squad, but just a bit short in a couple of areas.
Yeah, people might forget this, and people might think I'm defending inequality by saying this. They did pay 10 million compensation for Frank. it can easily be forgotten that they actually paid money to get Frank out of Brentford. They did pay 10 million for Frank. So, no, we don't include that in the summer transfer window because we wouldn't dare do that. But we did pay 10 million for Thomas Frank as well. I suppose a lot of the questions that I see going around the community, George, is the fact that was it a planned window or was it a window of opportunity when it comes to certain players that may not have been on the radar that became on the radar due to circumstances beyond anybody's control? I mean, I think what we do know is now what was very, very clear is that they identified Morgan Gibbs-White as the 10 they wanted. And again, depending on who you go to and who you read, I think the common consensus is that no one's ever quite seen a situation like that play out. And of course, it would be Tottenham, the club, to suffer from that kind of situation that played out. And it was really going to how quickly could they pivot from there onto other targets. But it did feel after that knockback from Gibbs-White, it did feel like the club were pretty stunned by that, to be fair, in terms of how long it took to kind of, if it's re-identify or go again when it comes to looking at alternative targets. So bearing in mind, kind of you had 3 protracted negotiations on going through the window, Gibbs-White, Eze, Savinho, none of them came off. How would you describe the window and how it ended up playing out?
I think the opportunistic is probably the right word as well. And like this is, and I'm not trying to be negative at all because like the guys were saying there, I love that we are shopping in this sort of next higher quality bracket for sure, 100%. And Kudus signing, I think, is unbelievable. But to have it right for what it was, at the same time, we had also agreed, well, I was on the good authority that we have agreed Semenyo, but would have cost us 70 million. And I think the Kudus situation arose where West Ham needed to sell and we were getting Kudus for a lot cut price and we pivoted away from Semenyo to get Kudus instead. And in my opinion, we should have got both in the first place. But I think that's where a lot of that seemed to happen. And then like, okay, Gibbs-White 100% should have been the main 10, clearly was our number 1 target. For whatever reason, you can't blame the club for what happened because that was just completely unprecedented. But then when you're taking, what was it, like a month to get closer to Eze, again, that was more of an opportunity because Arsenal backed down. So we saw that as a free run. That didn't pull off. Then we're sitting here scrambling, waiting for number 10. And I think if Chelsea had put a serious offer in, I genuinely would wonder a little bit who would we have signed a 10? Who would have been that 10 signing? I think Xavi Simons kind of fell on our lap a little bit, which is great because I think we've almost actually fallen upwards in that sense because I do genuinely believe that Xavi Simons is the better world-class talent out of the 3 of them. So that's fantastic. And like I said, I'm not...
You think on that with Simons, so just to qualify what you said there, you think we've ended up getting the best one out, the 3 potentially, you think, in Simons is over? Yeah.
I do. And look, I like all 3 players. I've loved Eze for years. I think he's a brilliant player, would have been great for us. I think Gibbs-White, that one kind of came out of nowhere and I didn't expect him to be a target for us at all. But you can completely see how he would fit in at the club and I think he'd be fantastic on the Frank. But if we're talking about the world-class talent, the ability to drop deep, drive across, be a dribbler and a passer. He's only 22 years old, so he's younger than the other guys, and he's already been around for years. He's already got Champions League experience. He is the better of the 3, in my opinion. So somehow we managed to do that. So look, signings are fantastic. I just think there have been a few opportunities in the market, and we still were left a little bit short for what we want, but I don't think we've ever had a window where we've got everything we wanted. And like Conor was saying there about us being like the 4th highest net spend, I don't like it when we include players like Tel and Danzo in that sort of situation. Well, Danzo, especially because that was an obligation from January. He was a January signing. So if Levy's trying to put out, or whoever is trying to put out that, oh, we spent 178 million net or whatever it is, well, then you're openly admitting that we spent nothing in January, and which they wouldn't want to point out. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, we spent 80 million in January on these 2, but we've actually spent 170 million in the summer on the 2 same players. You can't have it both ways. And from like I was saying earlier, Tel seemed all but absolutely guaranteed. So in my opinion, you've got to take those 2 out of the summer spending, especially because those 2 were in the at the club last summer. So when you compare that spend versus the other, I guess, top 4, we are miles off of it. So you can understand, I can totally understand people's frustrations as well as understanding that we've got some amazing talent in this squad and we are definitely shopping at that higher level now. So a bit of a mixed bag for me, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, just to come back around here for a second, Con. In terms of the wages, that's been obviously been a long debate we've had in the show. We've had Kieran Maguire on here, and again, I know you look at them heavily. Do you think now we have broken through to that next level of the wage structure? Because I can't imagine Kudus is coming in on cheap wages. Xavi Simons isn't coming in on cheap wages. Karim Awani's not coming in on cheap wages either. So when you look at maybe even the wage aspect of it, is it fair to say that when we see that next set of kind of revenue to wages, wages to revenue, are we going to see Spurs substantially moved up that ladder, do you think, in comparison to the other clubs they were at the time?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because you're always a year behind, right? So when we see
Yes,
the next lot, it's going to be based on the year that's just gone. And in that year that's just gone, it's going to go down again probably because the revenue is going to be a bit higher and the wage bill was still, so it's probably going to be less than 42%. So we're going to get another meltdown, and I'm going to do some more posts on Twitter probably. But then when you get the year after that, yeah, I mean, look, you've got Romero's new contract. He's obviously going to have had a significant pay increase. You're going to have the Champions League bonuses anyway in terms of everyone's contract, so the wage bill will go up naturally because of that. And then, as you say, Kudus, Palhinha, Simmons, Muani will all be what I would say to anyone, right? The reported wages that you see in things like Apology or in articles and stuff, take with a bit of a pinch of salt because footballers' wages are all higher than those numbers that are reported. So for all of those four, and the reason I can say that that's the case is because you can work the maths back from the accounts, and it doesn't work if that was the case. So yeah, all of those four will be on 200k, right? There or thereabouts. We have lost Son though, who was obviously our highest wages. Werner's gone, Forster's gone, Reguilon's gone. So you have lost a bit off the wage bill. But I think for this year, which will be the year after last, when the accounts come out, the Champions League year, I suspect we'll still be in that sort of 45%-ish range for wage to revenues, because our revenue will have gone up so much with the Champions League money. So even though the wage bill has gone up, it's sort of gone up relatively. So we've still got a huge amount of headroom, is basically the point I'm making when it comes to wages comparatively to others. The other thing with wages as well is that what you have to be mindful of is the UEFA squad cost ratio, right? That's the one that is most likely to impact us, which is basically wages plus amortization. Amortization is the transfer fee spread over the contract.
Right. Okay.
For that, we have a huge amount of headroom as well, comparably to other clubs. So Arsenal, for example, they're getting very close after what they've done this summer, which has been massive for them, to that 70%. They're very, very close to breaching it. And it's the reason they've had to structure the Hincapi deal the way they have. We still have a lot of headroom from that. So when I talk about relative ambition and what more we could have done, there is still that room for us. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out over the next year. I think for Arsenal, it's almost boom or bust a little bit this year. They have to get a trophy over the line, in my opinion, given what they've done.
Okay. I know I asked you, George, about this the other day about, expectations now of the season for us. What do we, I haven't asked anyone this yet, what do we feel is a minimum requirement that has to be achieved this season across the 4 competitions? I'll start with you, if I can, Ash. What do you think has to be a minimum requirement that you feel that's going to be the bare minimum?
Yeah, top 6, we have to stay in Europe. I think for where the club is at in terms of like revenue, financial backing, us going to be able to keep on attracting quality players that want higher wages, to actually keep the players here happy as well, because a lot of the players won't be happy if we're out of Europe. A lot of these players, the reason why Romero, because we haven't mentioned Romero signing a new contract, we haven't mentioned Spence signing a new contract. And I'm probably a few others I've forgotten, but just off the top of my head, those players are signing, and even Porro hasn't signed a new deal yet.
No, that's right.
He's coming into 2 years of his contract. So the point I'm making is, for these players to sign on, to keep getting new contracts, to keep our core strong together, to keep the spine relatively fixed where we can build off that, we need to keep these players and we need to keep them happy, And if we don't have Champions League football, a lot of those players, they're Champions League level players, and they're going to be looking to go elsewhere, in my opinion. and other clubs will come around. They'll come sniffing. They'll come looking and asking, Levy, how much do you want for this player? How much do you want for that? Do you understand?
Yep.
So I think it's definitely important that we finish minimum top 6. But I feel like if we're to be serious, we need to be finishing top 5. If that even means that's Champions League this season, because at the moment we don't know. I'm assuming top 5 will be Champions League and not top 4. So I honestly think that's where we need to be headed. Reality would be a different. I don't know. Do you understand? It all depends, because I know a lot of people saying Simmons is world class. Obviously, Kudos has got experience, you know, from West Ham, etc. Moani, he's had a career where he's been relatively good. He has had that stint in PSG, and he's had moments at Juventus where he has gone missing for a few games. Is he a type of player that has a mentality like where if he doesn't get on the score sheet or he doesn't do something right, does he sulk or does he get in his own head? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know the mentality of some of these players. If Simon makes a pass or he loses the ball and it's his mistake, is he throwing his hands up? So these little things and details, I don't know about some of these players. We're assuming that these players are going to come in, they're going to set the Premier League alight, and all's going to be dandy. We don't know. This is Spurs, remember. So I'm holding my breath is basically what I'm saying. I'm being very cautious. I'm not getting too ahead of myself. I'm not getting too excited. I am happy at the level, though. I'm very excited at the level and the potential. So I don't want to be disingenuous in that sense.
No.
This is where we need to be at. We need to keep the level and need to keep acquiring and having this type of expectation on our club. If we are to kind of bridge any type of gap on, because remember, we finished 17th, you know?
Yes.
We finished 17th. And so we've got a lot of catching up to do. And you're right, you know, we did spend a lot better, shall I say, than Aston Villa, you know. And Aston Villa, they were competing in the Champions League. They were competing in the Champions League, and obviously they went crazy on wages. They just couldn't afford it. Newcastle, they've got a striker. There's a lot of potential that Bayern Munich wanted to do to replace Kane.
Wout, isn't it? Yeah, Wout. Is it Wout? Forgive me.
Walter Maida. Yeah.
Walter Maida. Yeah. Walter Maida. Yeah.
He had a very successful under 21s. He was the top scorer for Germany and in the particular league. I know it's under 21s, but Stuttgart, he's been ripping it up. So, and we've got Wisa, who got, whether people say you think he's worth the money or not, he scored 19 non-penalty goals. So I know they've lost Isak, and a lot of people be looking at that. But I'm saying with Spurs, just to round it off, I think everything needs to be aligning in terms of injuries as well. Everything just needs to align. That centre-back partnership needs to be solid. And also, Frank has got to find a way, when we're not playing too well, he has to find a way to get that in-game management spot on. He's got to spot it, his team, his coaches, and they got to know when to change things. And that's all I can say, bro.
I think
it's going to be a busy season. We've got League Cup, all 4 fronts, Champions League, Premier League. It's a long season. It's a lot of games.
I know. Make sure that diary's free, Ash. That's all I'm saying. Don't go on. No one's allowed on holiday now for the next 60 games. Get ready, bro. Get ready. Colin, let's come to you. I think what I've been saying to you as well, when we've been picking off there as well, is the fact that this can't be just one window in terms of the fact that we've done the work of the caliber level players we've got to go for. This has to now be a fact that when we go into January, we're looking at the similar level, if not higher. You know, I think we can't drop our expectations now because we've had one window where we bought players that we feel are at the level. The most important thing is now we're consistent in terms of the fact that buying players that are going to continue to go into the first team. So on that basis, what do you feel is the minimum required for Frank and the team ahead of this season? 4 comps. What are we going to be aiming for? What are we going to be aiming for, comp?
Yeah, I mean, you're right in terms of the windows, just first of all. And Angie's first window was a decent window, right? We got Maddison, Van der Ven, Vicario, Udogie came back in. I know he wasn't a signing, but he came into the team. Johnson was there, right? Which obviously has not turned out great, but was who Ange wanted. So it was, and then his next summer window was pretty awful, right? So to your point, we definitely have to do it consistently. Look, I think I think with the season, and I'm sure we say this every year, but for me, this season is really critical, right? Because I think the last couple we've let Newcastle and Villa overtake us, right? In terms of
Totally
you know,
agree.
we're a mile off the top four right now,
Yeah.
and we've also let Newcastle and Villa. We've now got this opportunity because of the way that the financial rules have restricted them two clubs to massively close that gap. And obviously, I think bringing Frank in will
Yep.
do that naturally. And obviously, some of the signings that we discussed.
Yep.
Newcastle in particular, I think if they end up finishing in the Champions League positions again this year, I think they will become a huge problem, even more so than they already are, because now that they've sold Isak, that's created a whole huge amount of headroom for them
Right.
as relates to the financial rules, because it was a
Okay.
massive profit for them that they can now take advantage of, which they didn't necessarily have. Plus, they will have had that revenue growth year on year as
Right.
well. And if they're a bit more organised, because they had this, you know, they had a whole host of issues in terms of not having a CEO, a proper director of football, any of that stuff
Gosh,
going
no,
on.
Con. So even though they've spent the Isak money on Vissa and the guy that actually in Valtteri, they're still in a very good position. You're saying they're still in a very good
Massively.
position, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
because what it will be is they'll be able to take the full value of the profit that they made on him,
Right.
which is basically what he sold for less what was left of him. So that's going to be like 80 odd million.
Okay.
And then you only have to recognise the amortization for those two new signings, which is a fifth of their transfer fees, right? So it benefits you for a longer period, right? So they will be in a position where they can go big again next summer if they want to. So yeah, for us, I think look, that's a very long-winded way of getting back to your actual question, which was what's the expectations? Expectations for me is it's going to depend on injuries. I think if we get fortunate with injuries, touch wood, this season, I think there's no reason why we can't challenge for fifth, even sixth.
Okay.
But that's on a real knife edge where we could easily finish seventh or eighth or even ninth for me, depending on
Yeah.
where those injuries are. The FA Cup and League Cup, who knows? It depends who you get in the draw, right? Let's hope for more draws like Doncaster and not Liverpool away. So you know, I think that depends who we draw. And in the Champions League, again, we've got a really fortunate draw.
Yeah.
So I expect us to, we're definitely going to finish in the top 24 teams, you would think.
Hope
And then
so.
it depends, obviously, again, who you draw. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Okay. Feel like we're getting optimistic again. Feel like we're turning maybe a corner here. George, let's close with you. And I can tell the audience George rejected Top Goal for this, from what I understand. So, George, thanks so much. Sorry, Mike.
Anytime.
Sorry, Mike. Sorry, Mike. George, close us off. Your opinion in terms of minimum expectations this season now. Transfer window over. Back down to business. Champions League squad confirmed. Tell me what you think.
Echo the exact same things, really. I think you don't make these big signings now and shopping in that next sort of bracket without almost needing Champions League football again next year, in my eyes. And I've said it on multiple shows with you over the last few weeks. I think fifth is absolutely there for the taking, which I understand it's a big jump, right? Like 17th to fifth. But again, it's so injury dependent. But then I'm looking at the same thing for the other teams. I think the last time Newcastle were in the Champions League, they were hit with a few injuries and they completely flustered their season as well. And I'm looking at their back line and I don't think they've strengthened it, in my opinion. They brought in Thior, but all it takes is, I mean, Botman's almost like he is a walking injury himself. And I think they're drawing a fine line of a couple injuries at the back and they're going to really struggle. And obviously they didn't get Trafford over in line for goal. We all know Ramsdale's record with relegations. So that's going to be interesting to watch out for. I think Villa as well, saying I think they've started the season off terribly so far. If Watkins isn't firing, they've got no one. They're now going to have to rely on Sancho on loan and a couple of loanees and stuff like that. So I really do think these teams that were there and thereabouts probably will struggle. I think Bournemouth has started off well and have replaced their missing players quite well. And Semenyo is obviously on fire. But look, if we're not setting our expectations to be above the likes of Bournemouth, then we're not really going into a season right, if I'm being honest with you. So I think fifth really is on the cards for us if we can keep mainly the back line fit for most of the season. And then with the other stuff, I think it's like, getting to the next round of the Champions League would be fantastic. I'm not expecting us to go far in it, but we've got to get out of the group or league phase, whatever you call it.
Yep.
We would all love a trophy, whether it's FA Cup or League Cup on top of that. But I think we say this every year, and somehow we always get knocked out in the quarterfinals of some of the competitions. But it would be nice to potentially, go to a League Cup final early in the season, try and get another trophy off the line. I think that really sets the tone of the Europa League wasn't a fluke. It's actually us turning into winners. And what better way to do that than, albeit it's the smallest trophy, but it's the first one of the season. You can get it over the line and continue the success. And I think doing that would be great. So but I'm not saying I'm expecting us to win it, but it would be nice to see this team now not necessarily compete on all fronts, but look, let's get to a League Cup final at least, or semi-final at least, and then compete well for those Champions League spots.
Amen. George, you've been a star. George Achillia on the socials. George, thank you so much. Connor over at Livionomics 882. Make sure you follow Con for all Tottenham news and also financial related stuff over there. Absolutely great. Ash, of course, from Spurs Kings TV. We're going to direct you over there right now. But there you go. Look, we're over the transfer window. We're over the Champions League squad reveal. It means we are back down to business. We're not finished there yet. We've got some absolutely cracking shows to bring to you over this international break and more. Keep your eyes peeled, please, guys. Thank you so much for your support. For these guys here, keep liking, keep subscribing, and the same for Last Word on Spurs. We're heading you over to Spurs Kings TV for Ashmatic and more. And as always, come on, you Spurs.